But just the same, the building has to stay because it's a historic building, so aren't there stipulations that that can't be torn down anyway? Well,
I actually don't know. I think
Okay.
you could probably tear it down, but you'd have to go through a lot of paperwork. And the other thing about selling it, you would also have to go through an immense amount of paperwork because you couldn't just do it. You'd have to deal with the courts. You would have to be dealing with whoever the trustees of the current, trustees of the estate are. I mean, it would not be an easy thing to do to sell that property. Although theoretically, if you could find the right heir who had control over all of the estate and who said sure, then you could do it. But I don't know such a person, so.
Selectman Jasper.
Well, Kimball Webster died in 1915, I believe, and he has an awful lot of heirs, and an awful lot of them are still in town. So if you've been following what's going on with the Chandler
Yes.
Library, I think you would see that the likelihood that everyone would agree is next to nothing. But I think, moreover, one of the reasons that in all these years a library edition has not passed is because people do not want to touch that building.
Yes.
You know, it just, no matter what you tried to do, it just took away from the character of that building. And I think to do anything that takes away from the character of the building is going to be shot down by the voters. I do think that when we go to town meeting, and I'm not saying today, but by the time we go to town meeting, there had better be a plan for the reuse of that building, because that's been something that people tend to really want to know. All right, what are you going to do? And I'll go back. I mentioned it a month or so ago about the house on the corner, $40,000 for that house on the corner. How many parking spaces are you going to get? You know, how much is it going to cost to mitigate the asbestos? The selectmen at that time didn't have the answers. They just thought, oh, we're buying a house with land. We need it. It's right there for $40,000. You know, who could object to that? So they didn't do their homework. You have to do your homework, because people are going to say, well, I'm not voting for this if you're not going to tell me what you're going to do with that building. And I think we need to have a plan, and we collectively, because some of it I think is going to involve the town as well as the library. I'm, very much in favor of the genealogical aspect of it. You go to most libraries and there are sections devoted just to that. And where we still have the Greeley Free Library books, most of them at the Hills House, and some of them are in boxes in the attic. And while I agree with you, being in a building that has nearly constant temperature, it's going to be a lot better than being in an attic, or in some of the others are in boxes in a back room. That it just is a terrible situation for those books. So to do that is still far better than what we're doing currently. And but I think that's something that needs to be discussed, and there at least needs to be a plan, or I think this is in jeopardy just by the very nature of building a new building and leaving another one.
I agree pretty much with that, but the question is, how do we get to that idea? I mean, I think a lot of us have ideas of what we would like to do with it, but as you said, one of those ideas is not to keep that whole building as a library. We cannot do that.
Right.
So,
A
just
workshop.
by the nature of it.
I said a workshop.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is would you propose doing something like that? I mean, how are we going to get to even a tentative plan for what to do with that building?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is get some idea of what the number is going to be to renovate that building. And one of the things you've been saying all along is the electrical system, the fire alarm system, all the things that are in that building that are almost 100 years old need to be upgraded. Mm-hmm. So it's not as simple as taking the library sign off and putting on meeting space.
That's right.
You're probably talking $1 million to get that thing to electrical code today, heating, ADA, all the things that you would want to do if you're going to use that basement for a meeting space or whatever it may be. And again, I think that's one of the items that you have to take a look at, is what that cost will be. Because as much as saying we want to make it a genealogy lab, what will that cost us to do that? So I think cost on everything has to be kind of a question mark. And I guess I will be the semi-skunk at the picnic. And as much that you're now at $4 million, you're putting a basement in. Do you have the cost of that?
That would include the basement, right.
I've said all along that I supported the 3 million. When you sold the 2 houses and you maneuvered that deal, it's now 3.5 million, and now it's up to 4. I think the library is a good idea. I just think your number is creeping up to where, you know, I could easily sit here and say, yeah, go for it. But when people go into that voting booth, are they going to spend $4 million for a library? So I guess I just need to forewarn you that I think you're creeping up to the number that won't be supported at some point.
And actually, this is a response to Selectman Jasper earlier about the use of the Ferry Street proceeds. One other idea that has come up would be to use those proceeds, in fact, for the renovation of the old building.
But now you're taking that away, you're now bonding the full
Well, you're
amount
doing,
for the
no, I
library.
mean, those, yeah, you can't use it more than once, but that would be a way to have cash up front without, you know, without adding it to the tax rate. I mean, in effect, what you'd be doing would be adding it to the bond, if you did it that way.
You'd now be going for a $4 million bond.
Or less. I mean, that's not a number that's set in stone yet. And I would say if there's any way we can do it, it'll be less than that. But it might be more than 3.5 if we do the basement. So we're still working on the numbers on that.
Selectman McLean.
Yes, and I think, well, I don't know, I might be the other half of the skull here, but $4 million, if people don't support $4 million, well, if the Board of Selectmen, if you get the approval of the board, that means that we think it's financially at least responsible and doable and for the library and all things weighed, let's go for it. But if they don't support $4 million, it's never going to be less than $4 million because a year from now, it's going to be more just for the same thing, or we'll have to get a smaller library for the same amount. And so it's either two things. They either don't want a new library, period, or $4 million is too much. So if $4 million is too much, it's always going to be too much because it's only going to get higher. So it's either people don't want a library if this doesn't pass, or $4 million is too much. So whatever it is, I just think after this, if this is supported by the Board of Selectmen and it still fails, we've got to me, because I've already had people call me and say, why are you putting the library back on the ballot? We've said no, we've said no, we've said no. So if it doesn't pass, then we need to do something else. We just need something else. We need to work with the old library, or that's it, because people just, it's one or the other. And so, but I'll put my seal of approval on this, and we'll, as they say, we'll fly it up the flagpole and see who salutes, right? Is that what they say?
I'm not quite
Buy
sure.
it up
But
and see who salutes.
That's right.
well, Mr. Knowles and the library trustees, the building committee, having served as the liaison to the library last year, I have a great appreciation for what they have done, and I certainly do not want to dampen your enthusiasm. I'm just trying to say to all of us that at some point that number creeps up. And I know it's always for a good reason, but I do know the hard work that you people put into it. The Board of Selectmen earlier this year gave you a date. You've met it. You are, I think, meeting the requirement that the Board of Selectmen set for continuing to use that land. So I don't see any problem there. I think you need to finalize and come in at budget when you do have a number for the warrant. So again, I thank all the people that have put tirelessly tried to convince me that that's a better number.
I can understand. Now, is this going to be, is October 18th, we're supposed to be here with you on that date? Is that when you would get all the warrants? We have a
That
couple
would-
of other relative sort of bookkeeping warrant articles, but that would be the substantial one.
And that I would assume you'd be ready for them to be able to give us a hard and fast number for the warrant.
Yes. Okay.
Or on the night that we do the library review,
That is the
which
same
would
night.
be
That's the
the...
same
That's the
thing.
night
That's
you
the
just referred
18th
to.
of October.
Is that the night we're going to do the library?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, yes.